Bryony, welcome to the Finding Meaning in Work podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to have you. I've been meaning to do this for such a long time. And I think the timing is kind of fortunate because we're going to be talking about the future of sex on Good Friday.
Oh, yeah.
And the little Catholic rebel in me is just rejoicing.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about sex.
Yeah. So to begin with, what is the future of sex? I mean, not the future of sex, but this thing you've started.
Yeah, because I usually ask that question to
Yes.
people, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
the idea. But yeah, the future of sex is a podcast. It's a media company that's focused on this intersection between sexuality and technology,
Yep.
and how those two things change the way we live our lives, the way we fall
Yeah.
in love, the way we date, the way we're intimate. And out of that is also another business called Sextech School.
Sure.
And that's more business focused for founders that want to work in this crazy space called sex tech and want to work on the future of sex. And so that's the school side
Yeah, wow.
of what I'm doing, is helping founders create product, services, things that should be in the world that help shape the future of sex.
Amazing. And how would you define sex tech?
Yes.
Yeah.
The question everyone asks. They're like, what are you talking about? Are you
Yeah.
talking about sex robots? Are you talking about, super teledildonics, Wi-Fi enabled sex toys? And I go, yes, and. So
Yes.
it's all of that. So the easiest way to describe it is it's any technology designed to enhance sexuality. And
Sure.
people are still like, question mark, what's that? So the compound of two words, sexuality and technology. And how do those two intersect with each other? And when we think about sexuality, we think about obviously having sex, but also sex education, sexual health, crime and violence reporting, assault reporting.
Oh, wow.
Human trafficking,
Yep.
medicine,
Yeah.
tools for painful sex. So
Yeah.
that all falls in this sexuality bucket.
Sure.
And then on the technology side, we have, we can't go two steps without talking about AI, right? In terms of all the complex technologies, robotics, teledildonics is, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi enabled sex toys. But then simple things, Wi-Fi, apps. If we think about technology as a tool that just allows us to do a thing, to go from A to B, even I would classify things like lube as a piece of sex tech.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's a really broad industry. We take just one of those, dot points that falls into the sexuality bucket. So for instance, sex education, and then choose any technology to mix that up with.
Wow.
A sex education website, but it also could be, we have a student in the school at the moment that's working on delivering sex education via holograms for people with intellectual disabilities that understand more through pictures.
Yep.
So how do we use technology as hopefully a force for good to either enhance outcomes
Yep.
or alleviate things, whether that's trauma, painful sex, particularly for women, assault reporting, human trafficking. So figuring out how do we mix these two together to create a more positive future.
Wow, that's incredible. So, talk to me a little bit about the school. How did that come about?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, so I started the school because all my speaking gigs finished because of COVID. So 2020 rolled around, and I was in 2019. I was full time speaking about the future of sex.
And that was your main
That's my
work?
job.
That was your job.
Yeah. And so, and I was about to go to South by Southwest, and of course they cancelled it, and then everything got cancelled. And so I had to reinvent, well, what am I going to do with this? There's, limited people didn't want to pay the same amount to go on Zoom.
Yeah.
And the sort of other thing that was lurking in my inbox was people saying, hey, how do I get into this industry? Or I've got this idea. Is it normal? How do I do this? I can't find anything online. And so I'd previously run hackathons all around the world, kind of a nod to my previous background in tech, but I ran these sex tech hackathons here in Australia, in Singapore and in New York, and kind of loved that and really understood the rapid process it is to take an idea out of your head and even into just the most basic prototype. And so how many people were interested in doing this that had no, sexuality degree or anything, but just came from lived experience. And of course, all these people in my LinkedIn inbox going, I've got this brilliant idea, but I can't find anyone to help me. And so Sextech School was born out of that demand plus, COVID.
Yeah.
And it became this 6-week online program to take people through the common challenges you face when you're building a business in this space, starting with shame and stigma of building it and no one understanding you, right through to more sort of, stuff we experience in terms of how do I get the business model right in a, I'm going to say normal category, but no, there's all of that in the program and understanding, how do I do a lean canvas? How do I put together a pitch deck, but with the specifics of working in an industry that is, you walk into a room and whether that's a boardroom and a room with VCs in it, you're trying to open a bank account somewhere, people will have an intense reaction because it's because we're talking about SEX. And so how do you navigate that space? And so teaching that plus connecting people in to other founders that are going through that, or maybe 3 steps or 10 steps ahead to learn from them, but also to not feel alone.
Sure. Yeah.
Because this is the biggest part of sexuality in any case, personal or professional, is we feel quite alone and we feel like we're building in a vacuum or we're experiencing things in a vacuum and everyone else knows what to do.
Yeah. Did you feel that? Did you feel alone when you first started?
Absolutely. Yeah. I really, I was alone with Google. I think now people are alone with ChatGPT trying to build businesses. But I've really felt like, how do I do this? What do I do? And I remember Googling sex and technology. And the first article that came up was this article from a website called Hot Topics. I don't know, I was reporting on tech. And it was an article, opinion piece written by Cindy Gallop that said, what is sex tech and why is everyone ignoring it? And it was from even years before, I don't know, maybe 4 years before I'd even discovered there's a thing called sex tech. And so it was from there that I, was adding up the pieces and found, Cindy Gallup's in New York, fantastic. And then from there connected another dot, there's a Women of Sex Tech community and it's 40 female founders and they're all based in New York. And at the time I was based in New York City. So it was a bit of a beautiful moment in time for me because then I could kind of pursue this and meet people in real life.
Sure.
And go, hey, what are you experiencing? And started the podcast and live events from that place.
Okay.
So a bit of luck involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe now going right back.
Yeah.
Where are you from? Where were you born?
Melbourne.
Yeah,
right
wow.
Here.
Wow, nice. Whereabouts in
3144. Melbourne.
Melbourne, okay. I was just thinking, where the hell is that? But, great.
Actually born in St. Vincent's, but yeah. Not Melbourne. Home births weren't as popular back then. Definitely not with my mum.
Yeah. And this is a big question, but what was your upbringing like? Was it...
Pretty lovely.
Yeah?
Yeah. My parents were both in the creative industries. My dad's a cinematographer and my mum's a producer.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my childhood I spent on set.
Yep.
Sometimes in front of the camera. I don't know if you remember Sale of the Century or any of those game shows.
Yeah.
My mum was a producer on them, and occasionally I got the lucky job of being part of the, prizes when they had this rotating stage, and it'd be like, and a picnic set, and
you were there with
and the best day was when I got to sit next to Humphrey B. Bear. I don't know if you remember. This is really dating me.
Yeah.
Humphrey B. Bear, and sit next to him, and I don't know the prize because I was 3 years old, 4 years old. And that was the start of my, I guess, getting used to being around cameras and storytelling and understanding how to put stories together. And so my childhood was very creative. My parents were always making ads or movies. And then quite the opposite as soon as I stepped out of that door into, 3144 into Malvern and had a really nice school that I went to, a private girls' school.
Yeah, nice.
But that was much more focused on the other side of working the other side of your brain, the left side of mathematics and science and being disciplined and becoming a doctor, and really challenged that side of my brain. So I had these two parts, and then there was this other part which was like the things we don't talk about, which is the things I like to talk about now. So that was a bit of my childhood.
What were you like in school? Did you enjoy school?
I was the golden girl until about age 16.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was very academic. And then at about 16, the crown fell off, or I just ripped it off, and I thought, you know what, I'm kind of sick of this. Like, there was definitely a part of me that wanted to come through. And I remember I was just sort of thinking, how am I gonna survive another couple of years in, at the time, rebellious teenager. You know, I was thinking this was like prison, you know, when really it was like the most amazing education.
3144, what a prison.
And my parents had worked so hard to get me to, you know, a place where I had the best education, because and they were like, please, whatever you do, don't go into the arts, don't do anything creative.
Wow. Okay.
And they really, you know, they really wanted the best education and the best possibilities for me. And so, but at about 16, I think, you know, your rebellious side and your expression and all the things start to come through. And I realised, I don't think I want to do the doctor or the economics or the thing that I'm being told I should be doing. Yep. And so there was a bit of rebellion. There was a bit of like running away from home. One night, mind you, because I was the golden girl, I ran away, and school doesn't know this, but I ran to school. I was like, I'm going to run away from home, and ran and slept in the drama room and watched Chinese theatre. So like, still a freaking geek. But by the time high school finished up, very average sex education, and it wasn't like I'd had these marked or signalled moments of like, I must deliver amazing sex education or be a sexologist. That wasn't what was coming through. It was more like, I must go see the world, and we travelled as a family a lot. I must go do this by myself, like this fiercely independent, I need to go do things and figure out myself, and sort of took off as soon as I could.
So, but within, so in your early childhood and within your family, was your family open about sex, or open about talking about sex? Or was I
think they were very like typical middle class. There was not a amazing openness. There wasn't a closeness though. For instance, in grade 6, we had which I just always thought was normal until I told someone the other day, and they're like, we didn't have this at our primary school. We had the bra brigade. Okay. And it was like when you became old enough to get a bra, and you're in the bra brigade, and you're in the cool like place in school. And so I begged my mum to take me to Target, and I said, Mum, I need a bra, and obviously wanted like the biggest bra there. And she's like, here's the training wheels. But they were really supportive of that. The same thing happened when I got my period. I must have been year 7 or year 8. And I came home from school, and they had the champagne ready, and they were like, wow, congratulations, you're a woman. And so it wasn't like that was, it wasn't amazing, but it was pretty celebratory of who I was. But at the same time, there wasn't a great deal of openness. My mum went to school and was taught by nuns, and I always believed, I would not have sex until I was married. I'm not married. I'm still a virgin. So
this is part of your exploring now.
Now I'm just trying to intellectually figure it out. Which is actually, to be honest, I think part of the reason I chose the work and the way that I work things out is, and for women I think a lot, is intellectually first before embodying it, and is quite a blocker, but is actually just the way I've gone about things. But so my childhood was like, people were like, this is amazing, you had champagne when you got your period, fantastic. But there wasn't like a great deal of explanation around sexuality, gender, what it means to be in a healthy relationship, and that was largely absent at school, and I think still isn't in the curriculum other than consent. And then, that sort of messages at school, although amazing academically, a lot of the messaging at this private girls' school was around being ladylike. And, I got a detention for eating in the street. I was eating an ice cream in my school uniform, and they said, a teacher pulled up and said, that's unladylike, and gave me a detention slip.
Wow.
And so the rebellion was building. When I grew up in a time where it was like heroin chic was the, look for women. And
like
so
the Kate Moss.
Kate Moss, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels or something, or something like that. And so it was all about being small in body, and to a certain extent small in voice. So not taking up too much space was a message that I got growing up that I think characterised a lot of my 20s as well, and really built the foundations of a volcano that arrived early 30s to be like, I'm throwing in the towel, I'm sick of this, I need to do something completely different. Take up all the space, be big, be loud, and go and talk about things that I never got told about. Let's talk about the things that oddly remain silent.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So that, I think that notion of you're too small, you're not taking enough space, was that from an early childhood, or was that more in your teenage years that you felt that? Or that?
Definitely in the teenage years. I think that's such a high school thing. I also think it coincides with puberty and with developing and moving from being a child and a girl to a woman. And that was really important, that women took up some space. You could still be a doctor, but just like, don't be like too loud.
It's funny, one of our previous guests, they're called collective closets, and they make these amazing, they're both African sisters, and they make these amazing loud clothing, and I asked them, who were your first customers, and they thought it'd be the African sisters, sharing in this cultural knowledge. But it's exactly that. It's professional women who wanted to be loud and create space, and
makes sense. To me, it makes sense, because that was my experience of feeling like I had to push down this other expression, or this little girl probably that really wanted to take up space and be noisy and go see the world and be curious and not be punished for that.
All right. So you said that the crown shattered at 16. So what was your first exploration? Like, how did you, at that age, what did you want to do?
What was I being naughty about, I guess? I think it was, I started skipping school, and at the same time I was doing IB, so I was like highly academic, but also I was like, I was just trying to, it wasn't even a smart move. Do you know what I mean? At that point, you're just going, well, how can I bend the rules? How can I do things instead of people telling me what to do? And that was sort of the thing. So I was, skipping school, or, honestly, it was those sorts of things, running away, or, being naughty. And perhaps that was a little bit in the way that I was dressing, but I don't think so. Your body's also changing so rapidly during that time, and I was wearing braces for a little bit of it, and you're discovering boys and how you relate, and so it wasn't like I was out going, oh, how can I be intellectually rebellious? It was a lot about like the hormones.
And I mean, I don't think it has to be a big thing. Like, it doesn't have to be a big rebellion. No, it could be. I mean, I remember one thing I did was I shaved my head when I was 16.
Oh yeah, hair.
And that just set off a whole series of,
You know what I did? Good point. I got a tongue ring. And I got it, I think the day I finished school. I also took my brother, who was 2 years younger, to some piercing place, probably down on Chapel Street, you know what I mean? And I was like, I'm going to do this. And I felt so naughty. And I got this tongue ring, and it had I didn't even know what drugs were at that point, and I made sure I got the pill or something as this little capsule. So naughty, like really just trying to set my parents off. And came back home, and by the time I got back home, the piercing was had swollen so much, and I was in so much pain. And my mum just looked at me and she was like, what the hell are you doing? And she's like, take that thing out immediately. And I think 24 hours later it was gone. But my brother had an eyebrow piercing that had to go too. But those little things. We're trying to like take back control of our physical appearance and things that we're like playing with identities.
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know?
It's. I think at that age, you just realize that okay, this is one identity,
Yeah.
and I need to forge my own.
Yes.
And it could be really stupid things, but I think it's some ways important that you explore that.
So important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Try different things on.
Yeah.
Try different looks on. Try different ideas, different careers. Like
Yeah.
all of that is so important. And I
Yep.
think it's really hard to break that when you're in school and you're trying to do the right thing and the right pathway. I don't know, perhaps less so now, but there's pathways laid out for you.
Yes. Yeah.
And so trying to be okay with, instead of being, I'm going to do the opposite, I'm going to try 5 or 6 different things.
Yep.
Because you don't really land,
No.
I think. You've got to try so many different things
Yeah.
before you figure out who you really are.
Absolutely. And I think for me, that hasn't stopped. Like, I'm in my 40s now, and I'm still
I hear you.
still
Same
trying to
right
figure it
here.
out. And, you know,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
And still trying to try things, see what works, see what doesn't work. And I think I think this thing around identity and authenticity gets a bit confused in that, you know, you feel that how I came out is how I'm supposed to be,
Yeah.
whereas you don't really know who you are. you
No.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable.
Yep.
And it's scary and messy.
Yeah.
Because what if you get it wrong? Then everyone that told you that this was the pathway,
Exactly.
then they were right all along.
Yeah.
And that feels really
Yeah.
hard to face.
Yep.
And I think I probably faced that many times.
Yeah.
Just trying on different things.
Yep.
And still we continue to, but I think you build a resilience, you build a muscle to trying different things and letting it just flop if it flops.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a muscle, and it's also, I think, this feeling of fuck it, let's just see what happens. You know?
Welcome to your 40s, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it's characterized, isn't it?
So then when it came to, you know, you finishing school and then selecting something to study at uni, how did you navigate that decision?
Yeah, horribly. So I took a year off, gap year. I got the marks to get into commerce at Melbourne Uni.
Yep.
So I said, yes, I'll do that. And then I took a year off and went travelling. And by the time I came back, I don't think I was any clearer. I applied for RMIT and got into journalism there, and I just proceeded to do 2 degrees at once, which I think was like not okay.
Yeah.
And RMIT kicked me out, so just kept at Melbourne Uni, which now they'd hate to know that.
Wait, so you were at Melbourne Uni and RMIT at the same time?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know. There's definitely a loophole in the system there. But yeah, I was, again, just trying on different things. And, you know, the RMIT journalism thing is pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Whereas Melbourne Uni, they didn't really know where I was, I guess,
Yeah,
you know, at that point in time. But I ended up finishing the commerce degree while doing a bunch of other things and going out and working and trying on, again, different personas, different careers, while kind of battling through, I guess, accounting, economics, things that naturally didn't really come to me naturally.
Sure.
And I didn't really show an interest in, but it felt like the right thing to do.
Yep.
And I think I've always kind of straddled that line of doing the right thing and also doing the thing I want to do.
Yeah. And did anything from that degree, you look back on it and think, yeah, I'm glad I did that, or, you know?
I think the discipline of it, even if I wasn't there much, I think that, and now I'm really grateful for the alumni community that I have, and I'm quite involved with Melbourne Uni.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
Nice,
and their alumni network, And I was involved with them in New York and now here in Melbourne, and find they've got like a great entrepreneurship program there, and we won't make this an ad about Melbourne Uni, but it's been surprising to come back to that, because I think in the US, that's more the way, like your alma mater is a big part of your identity and your career. Excuse me. And I think Australia's just starting that. And if anything, that's what's returned for me is...
That's... So, but did you have a community at uni?
No.
Okay, yep. Were you
because
alone?
everyone was a year younger than me, because I'd gone off. I'd gone off travelling, and then can you imagine, you go off travelling at 18, you think, I own the world now. You know, and you're backpacking around, hanging out with 25-year-olds.
Where'd you go?
I did a bit of Thailand, and then I started in Turkey and went across the bottom of Europe from Turkey to Portugal. So right across the bottom for a year. And that was, amazing, so fun. But then you come back and everyone else is just out of school and done schoolies.
Yes.
And at that point in time, like a year's difference feels like 10 years, 15 years. So I wasn't really the most present at the school. I loved the creative writing. I would take the art subjects, but you could only take so many of them.
Yep.
And then I would disappear off to the snow or to the forest and hand in the assignments when I could, really.
The night before.
Yeah.
A couple of Red Bulls and,
Yeah, pretty much. So nothing's changed there.
Yeah. And then, so you finished commerce.
Finished commerce.
And then how did you navigate your first job? Was it?
I've been working since I was about 16, I think, on various different jobs. I think my first proper job was doing the snow reports at Falls Creek, so for Channel 9 and for the radio stations.
In front of the camera?
In front of the camera, yeah. So
with Humphrey Bear? Or?
No,
Okay.
but thanks to Humphrey. Shout out Humphrey for making me feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Best job ever.
Yeah.
Get to live in the snow for the season, go snowboarding every day. The only bummer is you have to get up at 5 a.m. to do all the radio weather reports every day, and that didn't jive well with like ending up at the pub doing Jaeger bombs.
Yes, the night before.
Till 2 a.m. But who
But
cares?
early 20s.
Early 20s, it's fine. So that was the first real-ish job. And then from there, when I came back to Melbourne, I went and worked at Lonely Planet for a while. I'm trying to think about the trajectory. Yeah. Lonely Planet for a while, and then
Down in Footscray?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, right when it was taken over by BBC. Best people.
Yeah.
What a family.
Yep.
Truly.
It's funny because a few years ago I was community manager at Inspire 9.
Oh, yeah.
And then they took over that building when Lonely Planet moved out.
Yes.
And so I was working there. I mean, they tried to make a co-working space over there.
So
but what an amazing building.
Such a cool building.
Yeah.
Such a very cool building. Full of very cool people
Yeah.
at Lonely Planet who were, really suited me, making travel their career,
Did you get to travel with Lonely Planet? Or were
I
you-
didn't. I
No.
just got to speak to the writers who were on
Okay.
the road,
Yeah.
and be like, can you update this part? It
Yep.
seems so glamorous.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to be a travel writer.
Yeah, wow. So what was your job there at Lonely Planet?
I started,
Yeah.
this is going to really age me.
Yeah.
I started as a pinpointer. Now, a pinpointer was when the Nokia phones, they were putting Lonely Planet maps and guidebooks on the...
On those little ones?
Yeah, on the phones, on the, I guess, the Blackberries, whatever it was.
Yeah.
We were using 3 different maps to pinpoint the locations in the book. We'd take the, book for Malaysia and look at, here's Joe's banana pancake spot in the beach. And then you'd use a satellite image, another, may have been Google Maps, and another image map, and you'd have to pinpoint digitally where you thought Joe's banana pancakes were. And we were in the side office to that big building. They'd rented a side office, and they filled it with contractors, myself included, and we were called pinpointers. And for about 6 months, we were pinpointing digitally. We were like transferring the Lonely Planet guidebook, but just the maps, the locations. I feel like it was onto Nokia phones.
That is what a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I got into the media department at Lonely Planet through that. But such a cool job, I remember. Anyway. Boring, but...
No, not boring at all. It's funny, that just reminded me of, now there are these geolocators, I don't know if you heard of them.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a competition where you show them a picture of anywhere in the world, and they go, that's
they'd be excellent
Buenos Aires.
pinpointers.
Yeah. If they could travel back in time.
Yeah. They missed their vocation for $25 an hour.
Yeah. But who knows, now those Nokia phones are making a comeback apparently.
Yeah, well, I feel like everything is from that era.
Yeah.
I'm like, how many times do we have to revisit the skirts over the jeans fashion or the dress? I mean, you probably didn't have to suffer through that. But
I didn't, no.
I did, yeah. So that's coming back, by the way.
Skirts over jeans.
Skirts or dresses over pants, yeah. It's a look.
You heard it first at the
Heard it here first.
Finding Meaning in Work podcast, Might have to do a branch out, Dan. Yeah. Fashion trends.
Yeah.
Wow, so Lonely Planet, and then
So I was a precocious young 20-something-year-old at Lonely Planet, and I really wanted to climb up the next rung. And my brother had just done his his master's thesis, something on Facebook. Facebook had just come out, and he said, Bri, you need to get into social media. You need to do digital strategy. And I was like, great, digital
Smart guy,
strategist. I'm
yeah.
going to do digital. I'm going to be a digital strategist. And
so just to place us in time, not to age you, but just to place us.
2008?
2008.
No, I don't know,
Okay.
actually.
Okay, let's just go with 2008.
Or maybe later. Because
I'm thinking social media strategy was around 2010-ish.
Yeah, I
2008.
think maybe it's 2010 then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So 2008, maybe Lonely Planet? I don't know.
If anyone's curious, they can stalk you on LinkedIn. But
Yeah, it might be in there. 2010, around that time,
Yeah.
digital strategist. And then, I joined Department of Justice and the government because they had this role come up. And I was like, fantastic. I'm going to get this salary bump and I'm going to go and be a digital strategist. It was actually so
For
fun.
the Department of Justice?
Yeah, it was so
Wow,
fun
okay.
because it was literally teaching people how to use Facebook. How cool. There were other components to the job, but I remember the best day I got to go out to the prisons and train the security on Facebook and Facebook locking down their profiles. Because what was coming through when we were using media monitoring was one of the security guards being like, Peter in cell block B is pretty cute, isn't he? But posting it on their Facebook, and then we'd see it through there. So, no one knew about privacy back then. We just thought only our friends see this. And, that was literally what was happening.
Yeah.
And coming through the media monitoring service, so we got to teach. Here's how you,
Yeah.
here's how you go lock
Send
down
a
those
private message
posts,
about
and maybe
who's-
don't do that. And that's where I got seconded to Deloitte for an innovation transfer project. Spent 3 months with that team, and that completely changed the trajectory of my career because then I found Yammer and got employed by this tech company called Yammer, and then shortly after went to New York.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Yammer was a pretty big deal back in the day because it was, I think, the first real, I think before the Slacks and before, all these messaging systems, it was the first real corporate community building tool.
Yeah. Enterprise social network.
Haven't lost it.
Yeah, still could go back. Have me back. No. Yeah, it was great. And so that I did a slide deck, I think, for Deloitte of how to use Yammer in 5 minutes, and I put it up on the slide. What is it? Slido or slideshow? Or
Slido? No. SlideShare?
SlideShare.
Yeah.
And Ross, who was working at Deloitte, he got poached by Yammer, and then they saw my SlideShare, and they were like, "Who is this person? They're teaching people how to use Yammer. You better join too." And so I joined with Ross. Early days were the first 2 in Australia.
Yeah.
Talking about Yammer, and then a year later got sent to New York.
That's incredible. So I suppose as a young person, just as you're moving through your career and moving upwards and diagonally and through all these, was there any sense of, shit, I don't know what I'm doing, who am I in this big world? We talked about finding your space and, how did you navigate that as like a young 20-year-old?
I think my strategy was I was very hungry to prove things and to say yes to everything. And so any opportunity I'd say yes to, and that was my way of navigating through this. Yes. And I'd been taught that through my mum, who used to make us call like producers and things and be like, I want work experience. And me and my brother were like, Mum, this is so embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so we'd go in and get work experience with different people and get used to picking up the phone. And
Like cold calling?
Yeah, and asking.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think I had that and had ambition. So it was like, which way am I going to go? And like, it was a consistent pipeline of me generating different opportunities, and I felt like, I really did feel like I can do this, but before I guess I went overseas, so when I was 18, I remember I called up, there was this paper, classifieds ad or whatever for Red's advertising, and I called them up and got the job, and it was door-to-door selling phone plans, you know, and so I made thousands of dollars. Like, it was crazy
Really?
for an 18-year-old. I was really good at it.
Wow.
And going out into suburbs and selling people these phone plans.
Yeah.
And literally switching their landlines.
That's
to,
the toughest job for
yeah,
anyone. Yeah.
really good
Yeah.
at getting to know, you know, general public. Probably good for speaking, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
And it really taught me, like, okay, you can talk in front of people.
Yep.
You can get them to switch their phone
Yeah,
line.
yeah.
So I think those sorts of things informed my, like, yes, I didn't know what I was doing, but I sure knew that, like, I could just, like, generate opportunities all
Yeah.
the time
Yeah.
and give it a go.
Yeah.
And that came from my parents.
Yeah, wow. Because I think for me, it is that there is that natural roadblock, you know, especially I've done, you know, sales jobs or not. It's more when you're trying something new that there's that internal hesitation. Like maybe some people would feel when they're about to knock on the door of a stranger.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's a bridge too far to cross. But you didn't have that? Or?
I probably did, but it like I had already experienced excitement and terrifying as the same concept. You know,
Wow,
it's sort of
yeah.
a very thin veil between
Yeah.
those two. You know, something can be on the other side of nervousness quite exciting.
Yep.
And while I was doing the snow reports, I was also competing in big air jumps, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of adrenaline, a lot of terrifying, facing such scary, you know, 60-foot jumps and going into them. And that sat you on the edge of that. So I was kind of versed in this idea of feeling uncomfortable. Wasn't even, I think the snowboarding was probably the biggest flex in terms of it was physical. But like, it comes back to, like, my parents being like, or my mum being like,
Yep. Pick up
here's
the
the
phone.
phone number,
Yeah.
and go and do it. And it, oh God, you know, that was it.
Yeah.
I had a lot of, like,
That is such good training for a young person.
social, yeah, it is. And so, and she, you know, I wanted to be an actress, and so she's like, okay, let's go do improv classes. And I remember I was driving past St. Martin's Theatre the other day, and I could viscerally recall the social anxiety I had going to those improvisation classes with older kids, you know, kids that were a bit older or probably good at theatre,
Yep.
and how I hated doing it. I
Yeah.
also hated going to Scouts, you know,
Yeah.
but I still did it. And
Yeah.
I actually think there's something in that, to be kind of forced to do these
Yeah, yeah.
things. You know, I think sometimes we don't do that anymore, but, like, it actually develops your own resilience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the thing. It's dealing with rejection, dealing with, because I think a lot of people don't try things because they feel that they can't deal with rejection because they feel that part of themselves is being rejected, not what you're putting out. So to get that training early on is yeah.
But I mean, I guess the other part that comes with is, yes, rejection therapy, but also you get such a high from when you do good things, right? When you get
Yes,
positive
for sure.
feedback.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson and the journey I'm going on is about how do you silence both of those sides so that this work feels fulfilling, feels meaningful to me, regardless of whether people love it.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
there's a addiction that comes through that of when you're getting this positive reinforcement about what you're doing is, you know, really, really good, that then
Yep.
you know, I don't want to try anything new then because I've got to stick to this
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
that people love.
Yep.
And then you kind of lose that.
That is such a good point. And I was listening to, I don't know if you know Rick Rubin,
Yeah, his book.
the Creative Act.
Yeah.
And he talks about this in the Creative Act.
Okay, haven't read it all, so
yeah,
hit
and
me.
it's about creativity is really what makes you come alive, regardless of what other people might think. It's like you writing in your own diary. It's like a diary entry, whatever you're doing, whether you're writing a song or whether you're writing a play or whatever. And the more you keep doing that, what attracts people is the passion you put into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And it's-
true.
Yeah.
The enthusiasm is like, isn't it like 80% of it?
Yep.
I think when founders come to me and they get worried about what if someone steals my idea?
Exactly.
You know, and I
Yeah.
go, listen, You can tell your idea to an engineer, chances are they're not going to be as passionate about, you know, in this case, I think it was like a sex education platform as you are. Like the passion, the enthusiasm is the staying power a lot of the time when an idea is just an idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And to flow through you.
And there's another quote that hit me that I kind of wrote an essay about. It's by poet William Blake. And he says that a fool that persists in his folly eventually becomes wise.
Love that.
Yeah. And I think, and I thought to myself, that's the reason I keep doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's more the internal gratification I get rather than the external downloads or whatever metric, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to butcher this quote, and you're going to remember who it's by, but it's kind of an add-on to this.
Challenge
it's
accepted.
Like, you know, the first 1,000, you know, attempts at the thing are not even. It's the gap between like what's in your head and what's actually produced. I forget this quote, but it's so real, and it's the same as just being the fool in the beginning, is allowing yourself to be the fool even when, you know, the podcast is in your mind this amazing whatever it is, but the first draft of it is 1,000 cuts away from that.
For sure, yeah.
But still persevering is probably the hardest thing. I think the first step is, it's really hard to do the thing first and to be the beginner and try the uncomfortable thing for yourself. There's so much you're internally battling against even putting a thing out.
For sure.
And then the second thing is, it's not where I want it to be.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it's this creative masterpiece. And look at all the things I have to fix: the sound design, the edit, the lighting, the thing. And I don't know how to do this. But 1,000 cuts later, you do. But then you're on to another thing. You know?
Yeah. And for me, you know, I recorded the first 5 episodes. I didn't put them out for 6 months.
I recorded 40 and didn't put them out.
Wow.
And I think I deleted 11.
Wow.
And now there's probably only 20 left. I feel you on that. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Show Your Work by Austin Kleon?
Yes, we were just talking about that, and it's over here. Yeah. Steal Like an Artist.
Also, I read that first. And those 2 books were instrumental in my philosophy before Future of Sex, in just continuing that thing of doing the uncomfortable thing. And Show Your Work. I mean, I really try and instill that into everyone that I come across, is like, it's so important to show the messy shit, you know?
And I was listening to an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and he talked about how the initial run of Seinfeld, like the first 4 episodes, I mean, if you watch them now, they're nothing like what happened later on. They're really rough, really, you know, almost, they seem unfinished.
Wow.
If you watch them now.
I'm going to go watch them.
Yeah. And he talked about how he put them out, and he was like, this is not going to last. But what he found was that a few comics in New York and Los Angeles loved what he was doing and said, you got to continue with this, whatever this is. And then he had the backing of like one rebel executive at NBC who said, you know, you got my backing. And so he continued on, and it only became kind of the Seinfeld we know, like in the 3rd or 4th season.
Amazing, isn't it? And just that, having that circle of people around you, it's really important who you choose, and sometimes unconsciously, right? Or people that love the thing you're doing, how much that can pump you up, and it helps you remember why you started to do the thing or the original idea. I remember, can I tell a story about that sort of similarly? How, like, not Jerry at all, not trying to be like that, but I had a coffee with this guy called Matthias, and he'd been working in an innovation job and loved his work. He was blogging, and I was really inspired by him, and we sat down and we had this coffee, and I told him the idea for Future of Sex, and that I wanted to do this thing, but I'd come from a tech background, and I was nervous what people would think, and you know, I was facing that block of putting that first step in place to put the thing out. And he said, why don't you ask people for money for it? And I was like,
Wow.
what? And he's like, ask people for money. Ask people to back you to do this, which felt deeply uncomfortable. And also because there's so many other, ways that money could flow to other causes, let's say. But I left that coffee and I told him I'd do it. And I walked away from that coffee and I filmed the video right away, and I must have put it on, it was one of those crowdfunding sites at the time, and I asked people for $1 to back this idea that I had this podcast. And I think I shared it to my Facebook as well, so people found out. And I don't know, within 2 weeks, I had $700, not 700 supporters. Some people donated $1, some people donated more. But what happened was, which was very smart by him, is I was then accountable for delivering this project to friends, family, even, I don't know, friends of friends that had put $1 in, that were expecting to see this work. And so it created a supporter group already, a backed supporter group and accountability to deliver to them. And then, so it wasn't like people got it immediately. They just thought, this is a good idea, you should do it. Don't run away. And it worked. And then, the slow burn of that is, then I think the next part of that is when you release something to the world and it's not just your friends and family that say, well, good job. It's a complete stranger. That shows up or that listens to a podcast.
And I think it's also then your community. And Kevin Kelly wrote this essay called 1,000 True Fans.
Oh,
it's amazing.
Yes.
And he said, if you're a creative person, to make a decent, livable income, you just need 1,000 true fans. Get them to pay you $100 and $150 a year. And that's your living. And you serve this community and they serve you back. It just makes economic sense, doesn't it? We don't have to be for everyone. And so back to your story. So you're in New York now. What was that like? Fantastic. I had wanted to go for about the year beforehand, probably forever, right? Growing up watching American TV and just being so in awe of what New York could be. And it was very much that, when I arrived, I was just like deer in the headlights, look at the fire engines, they're like in the movies, that was amazing. To have the support of a tech company like Yammer was incredible. So I didn't really have the struggle until I went out on my own. So I got situated for the first 3 years in New York, working for Microsoft because they bought Yammer. And had the best time. And the first year in any new country is really hard, and it was very isolating. But slowly, some of the things that broke down for me were the tall poppy syndrome that we brought across from Australia. Never talk about yourself. And I was meeting all these brash people, not necessarily New Yorkers, but they lived in New York and they lived that New York bold, I'm going to talk about myself and I'm going to tell you about my 10 different side hustles. And it's actually, at the time I was like, these guys are up themselves. But slowly I realized they're actually incredibly generous. People there are so generous with their connections, want people to succeed, want people to live their dreams. And that became such a good source of fuel. I also think being away from the pathway I felt like I was running away from, being away from Melbourne, 3144, all of that, really galvanized a new set of I'm going to try on different hats. I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this while I have the security of a job. I was trying to DJ like every other person in Brooklyn at one point, going to Burning Man, starting a visa business, which now is closed because that was totally illegal, trying to get more Aussies there. And, trying different photography projects. But really, again, I think New York ignited that sort of you can do anything and you should do. And this idea of side hustles was becoming really big. And so living there extremely fulfilling and also extremely stimulating. And because I'm quite an introvert, stepping out the door, I got
everything I needed,
Yeah.
you know, and that was fantastic because then
Yeah.
I could shut the door and be quiet,
Yeah.
but there was no need to search for things or to pick up the phone and find the person.
Yeah.
It was all happening, you know, around the corner, in the coffee shop, going
Yep.
to the theatre. Everything was so accessible, and so that was like such good fuel for
Yeah.
me, for creativity,
Yeah.
for confidence.
So you were working full time at Microsoft.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
What were you doing? What was your role there?
A head of thought leadership, whatever that means, or head
Okay.
of community. There were a
Yeah.
couple of roles, you know, as you get acquired,
Yep.
Yammer got acquired
Yeah.
by Microsoft. There was this reshuffling of where do we put these young tech, you know, upstarts
Yeah.
with their ping pong table, and you
Yep.
know, we were in customer success, but then it was like they didn't have customer success team at that point in time, and so I was working on future of work stuff and community, and how do we bring in the Yammer community into Microsoft's like SharePoint community and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a loose role,
Yeah.
which afforded me a great amount of time
Yep.
to explore many other things, and also inside a corporate beast,
Yep.
which at that point in time became like stifling, and I was like, I want to do all these other things that all these other people are doing, and all these entrepreneurs that I'm meeting are doing really interesting stuff, and that became like, okay, it's time.
And is this around the time when the seeds were planted for Future of Sex? Or-
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I actually don't think it was one moment anymore. I think
Yeah.
looking back, you know, it's so many different builds of, you know, from being told to be small to maybe sexual harassment in the workplace,
Yeah.
those sorts of things planted seeds of my interest in speaking up. There was an interest in pushing boundaries, of sitting on frontiers that always was inside me, and storytelling from a young age. But I think there was something in there where I felt like I really understood technology, and I really understood how to communicate technology, and I understood that it was going to impact our lives in ways that, you know, we just had never seen before.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you understood technology? You know, coming from a creative background.
Yeah, I think
And
I was surrounded by smart people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Yammer had just insanely smart
Yeah.
people and generous people that
Yeah.
really, you know, propelled my career up the Microsoft chain, but also were deeply interested in, you know, they were first, as you said, with the enterprise social networks,
Yes.
deeply interested in like almost human theory of how humans behave online.
Yep.
And so all that sort of social networking theories were infused into an enterprise product.
Yeah.
And so I really was sitting on the edge and meeting, you know, John Hagel, who was doing Centre for the Edge at Deloitte and stuff.
Yep.
So they were in our orbit, these
Yep.
top thinkers that were thinking about technology. And that exposure is like
That's incredible.
incredible. So I was excited by that.
Yeah. Because I think at the time as well, there was a lot of creativity in tech. I think
so true.
more so than now.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And also, I think tech was this new frontier, in that, you know, all these companies, at least at the time, they preached about changing the world, and, you know, we're going to do.
I think they believed it.
They believed it.
Yeah.
I mean, now obviously it's another story, but
Yeah.
but yeah, that would have been a glorious time to be in.
Oh, it was so fun. I'd
Yeah.
go back to that time, like relive a day or a week in that. It was so fun.
Yeah.
And so it was so optimistic.
Yep. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
And I got involved in tech, maybe in the tech sector rather, around 2015-ish. And yeah, I thought, I love these people. I just want to be around them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like the industry to work in,
Yeah.
you know.
So then, while you're in New York, how did the Future of Sex
come about. The
Yeah.
interest, I guess, I left Microsoft and I was doing freelance projects and trying these different things on, but I knew that I wanted to do something different,
Yeah.
and that I knew, and I was looking for a place for myself in the world and in my career, and I'd been doing a Future of Nightlife project for Absolute, and I really enjoyed that.
The vodka.
The vodka.
Yeah.
And they were thinking about how do we remain relevant when nightlife is changing? So anyone that was involved in art, music and technology was the brief to interview 100 people and figure out what the future of nightlife was. And I loved that. I loved, picking up the phone and interviewing people and talking to insanely smart people that were shaping up the future of nightlife. And at that point in time, it was like the changing format of partying, right? Where people were going from, we no longer go to nightclubs, we want day parties, or we want more, these morning parties, Dawnbreaker or Daybreaker in the States. So those sorts of things, and meeting people that were, also out there with their ideas, creating VR to simulate being in a hot tub with supermodels, and these sorts of interviews will really fuel and probably, more seeds around the future of sex, of like, what are they doing that they don't want to go outside and socialise? Why are we using technology? Like that sort of those pre-Black Mirror but Black Mirror-esque ideas that people were clearly having. And I was interviewing them and put this report together and thought, there's got to be something in here. And the sex thing for me was just like the obvious part, because it was rebellious. It was the thing that no one was talking about. I was interested in it personally. And I felt like I had a good place for myself with a technology background and entering a new field. But that's all also looking back.
Sure.
Because at the time, I just knew I want to do something. And I remember I was going to the universities and thinking, well, maybe I should be a sex therapist, and going and looking at all the courses, and it's going to take 10 years, and attending the info courses. And I went to Summit at Sea, which was this entrepreneur cruise on a boat, and I saw Esther Perel speak, really early days for her. And I was like, I want to do what she's doing. So there's just a series of fragments that were coming together for me, and knowing I want to do my own thing.
Can I ask, was sex part of the goal, or did that organically come up from these conversations you're having around partying?
Part of the goal of
what you wanted
my
to
career.
do?
In some way, there's the thread of like, I thought I wanted to be a sex therapist. In another thread, it's like the future of nightlife, and yes, these guys talking about, essentially simulating sex by not leaving the couch and putting the VR headsets on and simulating being in a hot tub with supermodels, right? There were threads where I was like, oh, this can thread through. But it wasn't, unlike most founders in the industry or most people that enter the industry, I can't pinpoint either a moment in time where I'm like, I need to make sex the career from a pleasure angle or from a trauma angle, which is usually, if you're entering into the industry, you come from a lived experience, because it's something you want to change the world on. But I kind of had like this average sex education, but I also was very motivated to do something different and creative, and something, at my time was creative. And I think on a personal level, I just wanted to work out relationships and sex. And so I think intellectually was always my way to do it, rather than embodying it. And so it was almost like this confluence of personal wants and confusion, plus I can see how this will ladder up, and I can see how I can take this to the next level, both for myself but for like the larger world around me.
Do you think also, this is maybe a leading question, but it was part of your rebellious nature to go where other people weren't going and talk about this topic?
So true. Of course, it's like anything that people aren't talking about, I want to talk about. You want to talk about death? Yes, let's talk about it. I don't want to talk about tax. Not many people do, but like I was really always excited by things that people don't want to talk about, and fascinated by that. Curious. Ask all the questions. Yes, I think you're right.
So now you're running, the Sextech School. How do you teach people about that stigma around sex and getting over that? And
there's a certain resilience, I think, around that. I think people come to Sextech School to find their people, which is a resilience, like a factor in it, is finding people around you that understand you on another level. And so that's a part of it. There's also like getting the reps in, you know, especially if you're wanting to be a public speaker on this topic, is how do you talk about this without freaking people out, without freaking yourself out, and without sounding creepy? Like, how do you make this a topic that doesn't trigger shame? How do you make this a topic that doesn't trigger your stigma? And I think for me, only through the act of doing this and trying on multiple different ways, I found that first and foremost, speaking about it normally allows people permission to speak about it normally too. So the minute I start talking about this, inevitably someone's going to tell me their story. Because they're like, finally someone that's talking about the thing that I just have not talked about. I think humour also works really well. I think that is disarming. So anything disarming can kind of cut through shame and can cut through stigma really well. And I think if you can find a way in, which for me was, you know, future of in front of sex, or sex tech and putting tech on the end, if you can find a way in that doesn't feel explicit and personal to people, then it's less threatening. And then so again, you're giving people a softer way to access a topic that feels off limits.
I saw that Bill Maher mentioned the future of sex on his talk show.
That was a fun fun moment.
That must have been something.
It was so fun. I had no idea that was going to happen, so that was really fun. I think, was I telling you I thought I'd been cancelled or something? Because I woke up on a Sunday morning and they had all these messages and all these Instagram followers and things, and I was thinking, oh no, something's gone wrong. Which is like, oh, doesn't that just tell you how much of a jaded founder I am? But no, so something had gone right. So it was really good. And in my work, you'll find occasionally there'll be these moments or these statements that really stick, and they stick culturally and socially because they are so sort of shocking or make you go, what? And in the case of Bill Maher was, you know, I believe that we're going to all have AI companions within the next 2 years, which is a shocking statement for people. I actually don't think it's shocking a couple of months later now. I think we're all accepting that. But it's something I could see and, you know, getting in that zeitgeist. It's often that's the case. Every couple of years something like that will pop up.
So where are you now with the future of sex and the Sextech School, and where do you see yourself going with it?
I'm returning back to podcasting. So
nice.
Storytelling and returning to the podcast and making it video, I think has been like a return to my creativity, to be honest, Rahul. It's just, it's really, it's my joy, is listening to people, finding out the most interesting frontier, weird, fascinating things, and being able to do that in a format that's, at this point, I feel like kind of like a TV show series type thing, which I've spent a couple of years in the background writing and trying to get TV shows around this topic up that haven't worked. And so now it's, again, podcasting, vodcasting has evolved so much that it's back in my hands to do that. So I've returned to that, and I also think at the right moment, because AI is at the forefront of everyone's minds, conversations at the moment. It really feels like sex tech is having finally its moment on stage and becoming a topic that people are like, we need to talk about this. Because,
I mean, it's not so much AI companions, it's more so, like, I think I got this from one of your videos, was that it's more like AI wingmen, for example. Or just helping you find a partner in the real world. That's one of the big uses of ChatGPT.
I mean, anything in terms of being a third and being, I think for me, that's the positive use is still using it as a tool rather than a replacement. And I think that's where our biggest fear is that technology is going to replace us. Now, how can technology insert itself into sex and relationships as a third? Well, potentially actually for people with threesomes. We've been talking about this, which is kind of wild to think. But how to explore, you know, there's a woman that's exploring her bisexuality. She's married to a man through ChatGPT. So I think there's like edge cases like that. The more mainstream cases at the moment are we're using ChatGPT as a relationship therapist or mediator through arguments. And of course in dating as this wingman, wingwoman concept in which dating apps are taking on and need to. Dating apps are reaching a point where there's huge dating app fatigue. People
Tell me about it.
are
Yeah.
spending, they're sick of spending so much time investing emotion and all that sort of stuff. So that's infused into these products as well. So it's not just us as ChatGPT users, but we're seeing that come through in the sex tech as a third.
Yeah, wow. So as you now, take the future of sex and the sex school to the future, really,
Yeah.
is there anything you feel you need to stop doing, like within yourself?
Oh.
Or
Stop saying yes. Stop saying yes.
what are you saying yes to that you need to?
Well, I think
Besides this podcast, man.
like yeah.
Thank you for saying yes to this. Yeah.
I'm stopping tomorrow. I am at a point. There's a couple of interesting things I feel like for me are going on at this moment. Personally, I'm at a point where I've built the platform of sex tech enough that I think the considerations for the next evolution of sex tech aren't about people getting to know the industry, but are about the ethics and the responsibilities of that. Now, I would love to contribute to that in some way. That's not
The ethics of technology, or
of sex tech.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
but
yeah.
it is what we're talking about is the technology part of sex tech.
Sure.
Right, and I think that's largely been ignored. There's a lot of, it's kind of the Wild West, for privacy, for data, for all of that. So that as an industry, that is the next frontier. For me personally, I think, and we touched on this before, of like you're trying to find your place, right? Which is about your identity. I have poured so much of myself and into my work that my work and my identity are tied so much in my own mind, soul, and the process of rediscovering other things that might ignite that creativity, whether that's painting or, for me, return to podcasting is also return to storytelling and creativity. But just on a personal note, unhooking from, the great feedback that I'm getting, or the platform, or me and sex tech becoming this, like who is Bryony without that, And that's a question I'm enjoying exploring and just sitting with at the moment. And then in terms of like next career steps, what would it look like to step outside of sex tech and step into other frontier industries?
Yeah, wow.
Whether that's psychedelics or death or other things that people don't talk about but shape the future of self. So there's a couple of things going on for me at the moment, and I'm lucky enough that I can kind of I have to take a breath.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's not lucky. I like have to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's essential. That's incredible, Brian. Like, I really look forward to seeing what comes next, and
Thank you.
and this next evolution of Bryony,
Yeah.
apart from sex and the future of sex and all of that. Yeah.
Thanks.
This is usually my final question.
Okay.
The name of this podcast is Finding Meaning in Work.
Yeah.
To you, what does the term meaningful work mean?
Well, luckily you sent me that question beforehand, so I had a chance to think about it. Because I'm curious what I would have said just off the cuff, but when I really inquired about what it means for me to do meaningful work, it is things that change me and change the world around me.
Yep.
And when I think about what I've been doing, it is, I think my work, and it's funny because we just talked about it's so linked to my identity, but I'm always trying to develop myself through the work I do in the world. And so that's been a through line very strongly in the last 10 years when I found my stride. And I think part of that has been a real want to change the world, in some way, which is probably a bit egocentric, in some ways, and probably a bit like community oriented in another.
Yeah.
And that's just what it means to be human.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Brian. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Giving up, part of your long weekend and coming all the way
Such
here.
a pleasure. Said
Really.
yes.
Saying no starting tomorrow.
Easter no.
Easter no. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you're enjoying and are learning from this podcast, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. A great zero-cost way to support us is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you are feeling extra generous, it'd be great if you could leave a comment or feedback on our Apple Podcast or YouTube pages. Or you could email your comments and feedback to me directly at rahul@disruptivebusinessnetwork.com. That's RAHUL @disruptivebusinessnetwork, all one word, .com. Finally, a big shout out to our producer Dan Scahill for his work on the keys and to Vashti Civil for writing the original music for our theme. Until next time, this is your host, Rahul Sohns, signing off. Bye.